Come on in, join the conversation. Today we're talking about how bad do you want it? How bad do you want it? If I could say it like this, it's on you. What you gonna do? I got a little rough ride in me today. Come on in, like and share this broadcast with as many as possible. I'm gonna do the same. I need to share it to a group or 3. Hey, come on in. Let me know where you're watching from. I'm going to try it one more time. Today is Thursday. We're coming in one more time. Hey, with that one thumbs up. Thank you. I don't know who you are, but thank you for joining me anyway. We are in another installment of Confidential Conversations. Today's conversation is how bad do you want it? How bad do you want what you say you want? We talk about it all the time, but when push comes to shove, do we really want it the way that we say it? And it's coming out of my 21-day devotional, Confidential Conversations. It was 21 conversations that I had with God over a period of my life that I was being processed for purpose. Come on in. Let me know where you're coming from. It was during a period of time while I was being processed for purpose. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what the process was, but I knew I fought it for a long time. And it was not until I surrendered to the process that God was able to do what he needed to do with me. And so now we are on day number 19 in the book. And in it, it's the chapter or the day that talked about how bad do you want it. And so as people come in, I'm not going to be labored. I'm one that if it's time to talk, it's time to talk. And you just have to catch the replay. And so today we're talking about, again, how bad do you want it? And yesterday on Tuesday, we talked about the promise is still in effect. And so if I could recap on that just a little bit so that I can get into day number 19, we more or less just talked about how God will make us a promise. And through the things that happen in our lives, we often sometimes think that because we're not hearing from God, we think that because he's answering us slowly or not at all, that the promises that he made to us were null and void, or that they've been, that we lost them. And so what we found out is that no matter what happens, I don't care, even in our disobedience, well, he will take it from us. Sometimes he withholds it from us until we can get to that place that we're really ready for it, and until we're ready to surrender. And we also talked about how God really just wanted to know if we were after the promise or the promise keeper. And so we get to this point in the book, how bad do you want it? After God revealed to me, I'm the promise, LaTanya. I am the promise. You come and you chase after me, the promise keeper, and everything else will be added unto you if you seek me first, the kingdom of heaven and its righteousness. We know the scripture, Matthew 6:33, that everything else will be added. So now I'm in this day on day number 19, and we are and God asked me the question, or I asked myself the question, how bad do you want it? And so as I started the chapter, I had to pull something out of a movie that I saw. And in the movie, I think it was Gabrielle Union, she said, desperate times call for desperate measures. When you're in this place of being processed, when you're in this place where you know that God has shown you the promise, you now begin to see just what God sees. Now your eyes are clear. The spiritual cataracts have fallen from your eyes. You now can see through the storm. The song says, I can see clearly now the rain is gone. You can really now see things the way that God sees them. And as you begin to see it the way he sees it, the enemy will try and throw some things at you. The enemy will be hard pressed after your promise. And so now you're having to, or I had to at this point, had to ask myself, is what I'm going through really worth it all? All the damage all the heartache, all the abuse, and God is trying to pull these things out of me, all of the losses that I had endured, the friendships, the money, the things that I had lost. Was it really worth it? Was chasing after God really worth it? And so I had to go back and ask myself, how bad did you really want what God says you can have from him? And I'm not just talking about, material things. How bad do you really want intimacy with God? How bad do you want a relationship where you get to sup with God and commune with Him and sit at His feet and receive from Him? And so I had to, in this place, I had to start talking to myself. And if you've ever been to one of my empowerment seminars, if you've ever been to my conferences, one of the things I always quote is what my mom tells us all the time. And she says, look, pick yourself up by your bootstraps and keep moving. And so I had to remember to pick myself up by my bootstraps, but then I had to tell myself, like I tell those that come to the seminars, is use your words. Find your words and start talking to yourself. And so I had to start talking to myself. And so in that, I had to tell myself, listen, girl, pick yourself up, dust yourself off, pull your big girl pants up and keep moving, because at the end of the day, God made you a promise. We just found that out. The promise is still in effect. And how you gonna go get it? And so I asked myself that question over and over and over again. And as I began to study the word, here's what I always say, I didn't like, because I was at this period, I was kind of new in ministry. I was new in ministry. And so what I did not want to do, I never asked anybody what the word said. So I always asked God when I didn't understand something about what it was He was trying to show me, was God, show me in your word. Before anybody could prophesy over my life, before anybody could lay hands and say what thus said the Lord, God has already in some way or another revealed it to me in His word. And so here I was, I began to ask God, in me asking, how bad do I want it? What does this really mean for me? And I found myself reading the book of Esther, and real short book. I think Esther have 9, 10, maybe 13 chapters at the most, but real short book of the Bible. But it was such a powerful book, because if you read the story of Esther, Esther was an orphan, basically. She was kept by, there's a debate, because I say he was her cousin. Most people say that's her uncle, but she was kept by Mordecai. Mordecai raised Esther. So if you read the story of Esther, you find out that Esther didn't have a promise, right? She was a daughter with Mordecai raised Esther as a daughter with no promise. She had no promise in her life when she was being raised until she was elevated for purpose. And so many of us, as we go through this process, we don't know what it is God is doing in our lives. And so sometimes we walk around aimlessly thinking that we don't have a particular purpose. We are walking around aimlessly thinking that we don't have a particular promise. But we have to know, as we said in chapter 18, the promise is in effect. We just got to go get it. How bad did you want it? And so Esther was this woman. She didn't have a promise. And as the story went, I found out that Esther was not called by God. And I love to debate with the boys. They debate about the woman with the issue of blood, and I talk about something else. But Esther was a woman who was not called by God, but she was used by God. She wasn't called. She didn't have a particular calling on her life. She wasn't apostle. She wasn't prophet. She wasn't pastor. She wasn't intercessor. She wasn't missionary. She wasn't a teacher. She wasn't any of those things. Esther was just a plain old girl. Right? She had lost her parents early. Her cousin was raising her. And here she was, used by God. Many of us were not called into ministry. Many of us were not called into the fivefold to be apostles, prophets, teachers, and pastors. We're just called to love God and to be obedient to the will of God. And in your obedience, God will use you in the very thing that He needs. And that's what happened to Esther. Esther was in the right place at the right time, just being there in position to be promoted. And there she was. And God brings Esther on the scene. In this story, I started to see pieces of me, because I didn't know who God had called me to be. Everybody wanted to label me as this minister, as this evangelist, as this, whatever. And I just wanted to be me. And here it was. God brings Esther on the scene with no name, basically, right? No name. He brings her up out of obscurity. And so I'm getting to this, how bad do you want it? So as He brings her up not just to be the new queen, right? He brings her up to save a nation. And that's what I started to see. Each and every one of us have to understand that God called us for a particular purpose for such a time as this. What that thing is God called us for, we have to seek first the kingdom of heaven and His righteousness and all that good stuff, right? To know what He is saying that He's called us to do. So with Esther, He called her to raise a nation. He called her forth. He called her forth to raise a nation. She literally came out of nowhere. And often that's how God works with us. He'll bring us up out out of obscurity. Nobody knows our name. And then all of a sudden, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. Here she is on the scene doing some stuff, and everybody want to know, where did she come from? Well, you didn't just come up out of nowhere. God was processing you for purpose. If you follow this book as we've been reading it, God has been processing us through purpose, right? For purpose. So while we were in the wilderness, while we were being developed, while we were in this place where God was training us like Jeremiah before he sent us out, he called us, he trained us, then he sent us out. Before people begin to know your name, come on. I hear cheers in my ear. Would go to the place where everybody knows your name. Some people didn't know you. They didn't know who Esther was. Here she was, a beautiful young girl. Just happened to fall on the scene because of her cousin Mordecai. And so God used her again to save the nation. And so God was looking for someone to fulfill his promise, and he chose Esther. And like Esther, God chose us. When we're in a place, in position, when we are in a position to stand up, when we're strong enough to stand up, we may not think, listen to this, we may not think we're strong enough. We may feel like we're at our weakest, our lowest place in life. We may feel like we're not educated enough. We don't have enough money. We don't have the bandwidth or the capacity. But God said when Esther was positioned to stand up, hey, Kedra, when she was positioned to stand up, that's when he began to use her. So when it's your turn to get in position, you have to do the same thing. You never know when God is going to raise you up to save somebody in your family. What is that thing? How bad do you want your children saved, your family saved? How bad do you want the house? Y'all know I hate to talk about material stuff, but how bad do you want the houses, cars, and clothes? How bad do you want the degree? How bad do you want, the things that God, the business that God has shown you? Are you willing to stand and get in position? Are you willing to fight to the very end? Are you willing, listen to this, be like Jacob and don't let go until you come out of that thing. Even if you come, until God blesses you, even if you don't come out of that thing but with a limp. How bad do you want? Jacob told the angel, when he fought the angel, he said, I'm not letting you go until you bless me. How bad do you want that thing? Are you willing to say to God, God, I see what you saw. You made me a promise. You just told me that no matter what I've gone through, no matter how much you've delayed it, you didn't deny it, that the promise is still in effect. God, I'm not letting you go. I'm not letting you go. I'm not letting the promise go. I'm not letting my children go. I'm not letting my grandchildren go. I'm not letting my husband go, my wife go, whatever it is that you want so desperately that you know God has given you. Don't you dare let the enemy come in, because that's what he'll do. He'll come in and will use that very thing that you want so desperately against you. Desperate times call for desperate measures. You got to do, if you want different results, you got to do something different. You can't do the same thing every day, day after day. You know the cliche, day after day, over and over, and expect different results. If you get up every day and don't brush your teeth, you are subject to get cavities. If you get up every day and you don't comb your hair, you're subject to have your hair. It's just certain things you have to expect by the behavior that we have. And so here, I had to ask myself, how bad do you want what God said you want, that you could have? How bad do you want the promise that he made you? Because at that time, God had made me some promises, and I had begun to write them down. He had begun to show me visions that were bigger than me. And sometimes because you go through the pain that you go through, the vision now becomes skewed. Sometimes the vision becomes something that's in the back burner, and you don't particularly care about the vision anymore because the pain of getting to promise hurts you so bad. So I had to pick myself up, like my mom said, by my bootstraps, pick myself up and keep moving. Pick myself up by my bootstrap, dust myself off, put my lipstick on, and walk this thing out pretty as I could be, not letting you see me sweat, because I knew the promise that God said that he had for me. God said that he would never leave me or forsake me. I had to start quoting back the word. I had to start empowering me. I had to know. Remember, I told you, you don't have to know every scripture. Just know the scripture that you need at the moment you need it. So I had to start talking to myself, saying, LaTanya, you are fearfully and wonderfully made. You are the head and not the tail. You are the lender and not the borrower. I had to talk to myself and tell myself that my daddy, God, owns a cattle on 1,000 hills. So if he owns them, I'm rich too. Come on, I had to tell myself that I could do all things. So when things hit the fan, I had to keep talking. And that's what happens. We said Tuesday, we oftentimes allow the promise to become our problem. God begins to show us a promise. And the promise is so big, it's so juicy, it's so good, it's so expansive. But because we don't have the wherewithal, we don't have the credit, we don't have the husband. Hey, everybody, we don't have the stuff that we think we need. But what does the word of God tell us? It's not by our power, not by our might, but by his spirit. It says that he is the one that gives us the power to get wealth. So if he showed it to you, come on, Esther. He called Esther. Listen to this. I'm going to tell you again. Esther wasn't called to be a prophet, a pastor, a preacher, a teacher, evangelist, a missionary. Esther was just a plain old girl used by God to do what he needed her to do. God needed Esther to save a nation. What does God need you to do? But because they didn't give you a title, you can't do it. God needs us to do something. So we have to be willing to go through some stuff. Okay, we have to be willing to fight and finish strong. Come on. We have to be, look, God knew when he called you what he was calling you to deal with. So he knew when he called you, listen to this, to be a business owner. He knew that you didn't have no credit. He knew that your capacity was low. He knew that you didn't have all the degrees. When God called you to open up a ministry, he knew you didn't have no members in the pew to sit there. He knew what was going to happen. He knew you were going to have some members that wasn't going to pay your tithes, their tithes. He knew that. But God said, keep your eye on me. He said, seek me first, the kingdom and all of its righteousness, and then I'll begin to add it unto you. But don't let the promise become the problem. I called you to save a nation. I called you to save your sister. I called you to save your mother, your cousin. I called you to get your nephew off the street. I called you to do some stuff in this world, but because they didn't give you a title, because you made your promise a problem, because you got afraid, LaTanya, because it was bigger than what you thought. Because that's what God does. When he shows us something, listen to this, and this is one thing I want y'all to know about a vision. When God gives you a vision, that vision is never something that you can accomplish by yourself. God's visions are always corporate visions, and I'm not talking about corporate as in corporations. God's vision for you is so big, it's going to take a corporate body, a governing body to help you with the vision. So if you have a vision and you're the only one that can handle that vision, that ain't the vision from God. Because his vision is always going to be bigger than the visionary. God's vision is going to always be bigger than the visionary. So when God started to show you, he told you in day 18, the promise is still in effect. You just somewhere got scared. The promise is still in effect. You just somewhere crying because it didn't come the way you wanted it. The promise is still in effect, but you're going to have to go call that girl that I just told you, because sometimes God will make us go back to a place that we think we're repeating, so the vision can be accomplished. Just like the children of Israel. They thought they were repeating when God told them to go back and repeat. And they began to get tired. But God knew in that process. And I'm still talking about how bad do you want it? Because they died off in the wilderness because they didn't want it bad enough. They didn't want to be obedient. That's some of us. We don't want to be obedient. In this process with me, when I'm going through this book, when I'm going through this story, I had to talk to myself. Do I want to do what God says? Or do I want to do what they say? Do I still want to hang out at the bar? Because I was still trying to vacillate between the two. I was still going between the cigar bar. I smoke cigars. I was still trying to go between the cigar bar and hang with the boys because I ain't like you girls and still try to do what God said. He said, no, I need you to come from out of there. Come from out of Lodabar. Come on from up out of there. Because I'm trying to raise you up to save a nation, but because you're still trying to go to a place I don't want you to go, you can't get there. How bad do you want what I say you can have? How bad do you want it? If you remain, listen to this, and so I'm going to read this from the book. This is what Mordecai comes to Esther and he tells Esther. If you read it, I think it's in chapter 6. He tells her, he said, for if you remain completely silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another source. Listen, from another place. But you and your father's house will perish. What he was saying to us, he said, you can stay there if you want to. You don't have to open your mouth if you don't want to. But if you don't do it, somebody else is going to do it. But then he also went back to say, you can choose to do nothing, or in everything that you work for. Listen, this is Latanya's paraphrase. You can stand there and do nothing about what God showed you. And everything that you work for, all the pain, all the stuff, all the promises that he showed you will die off with you. If you know the story about Esther, and I would encourage you to go and read it. This was a time that Esther was raised up to be the queen. Her husband had already had a wife, but she didn't want to do some, and that's another story for another day. She didn't want to do some of the stuff that her husband wanted her to do. And so he demoted her, basically. And so here it was, Esther was being groomed for a whole year to become this wife. And she was in this, I'm going to say, a beauty pageant. Okay, so they were processing her for purpose in this beauty pageant. And here she was. She was making sure the skin was soft, making sure she smelled good, making sure she looked good, making all this stuff, right? But in this, there was some stuff going on in the background. There was her husband's, and can't recall who he was, but his name was Haman. Haman was plotting to kill the nation. Haman was plotting to kill off every Jew that was out there, but her husband didn't know that he had married a Jew. Esther's husband didn't know she was a Jew until it was time. There is going to be a time in your life that they won't know who you are again. God will raise you up out of obscurity so that he could use you to do just what he needs you to do. Hey, Crystal, just to do what he needs you to do. They won't ever know your name until he needs them to know your name. And at this time, Mordecai comes to Esther. He said, listen, you could either go down here and you can go tell this man that, look, your people are about to perish because of his boy. And I'm paraphrasing it, Message version style. And you can go and save us, or you can sit here, live in your fancy house behind this gate and do what you do and be the queen, and everybody, including you, will die. Because when he find out that you a Jew, you're going to die too. So she had a choice to make. Esther had to, this is the part that I loved about this when I read Esther. Esther said, I'm a die if I do, I'm a die if I don't. That's what she had to make a choice. How bad do you want what God say you can have? You have to make a determination that I'm going to do what God's, I'm a ride or die with God till the wheels roll off. I love to say till the wheels roll off. I'm a ride with him till the wheels roll off. I'm a ride or die with him, but because I want what he said I could have. I'm a die. So Esther went out there and she posted up, y'all. She went out there because she couldn't go see her husband, right? Her husband king, until he called for her. So if she went at the wrong time and she didn't get permission to come, she would have died, right? And so Esther waited to the perfect time. She was looking good, smelling good, booed, posted up. I'm Message version. She posted up at the palace gate until he signaled for her. And when he signaled for her, here she comes. And she talks to her boo thing, her husband, her king thing. I'm just paraphrasing. And then she begins to tell him, did you hear that your boy was trying to kill these people? And I'm paraphrasing, y'all. And so when Chanel, when he finds out, he orders a cease and desist. But see, so we have to get to the place where we don't care what's going to happen to us. We have to, again, go back to desperate times call for desperate measures. What is the thing that God showed you? What's the thing that he showed you that the enemy is fighting you? He's warring. He's warring for your promise. The enemy is warring after your promise. He's hard pressed after the thing, but because you won't fight for it, you're going to let him take it. You won't get on your knees and pray, so you're going to let him take it. You won't fast. Because Esther fasted for 3 days, no food. She said, I'm going to fast. She told Mordecai, you go do what you going to do. You go get the people together. I'm going to go get my girls. See, some of y'all don't even have some girls that y'all can go fast with when you're having some problems. I'm just paraphrasing it, Message version style, Latanya style. So Esther said, you go get your boys. You go get the people. Y'all go get prepared. Because we're going to go to fight. But I'm going to go get my girls. We're going to fast for 3 days. And when we come out of this thing, God going to give us instruction on what to do. Some of us got to get so connected with some people that when we get connected with them, that we come out out with the same perspective. We come out with the same vision that God has said. Again, vision is never given to you by yourself to handle alone. If God gave Esther a vision, that vision had to be taken care of corporately. She had to have a corporate body of people to be able to help her with the vision that God gave her. She was not going to be able to save the nation by herself. She had to rally up her troop, and her troop had to be ride or die with her. So we got to get to that place that we are okay with pulling people in to get some of the things that God said we could have. We got to get to that place, women. We have to stop pulling one another down. Again, the vision God gave you, it hadn't come to pass, but God promised us that it's still in effect. It could have been 10 years ago that he showed you this thing. He said, it's still in effect, but how bad do you want it? Are you willing to hold on to me? Are you willing to fast until breakthrough comes? Are you willing to not let me go, even if you got to be like Jacob and walk out of that thing with a limp? Are you willing? How bad do you want it? Desperate time. We're in the last 18 days of this year. And even though God is not subjected to time, right? Natural time. But God can do something in the last hour, the last second, and it's all done, right? But what are you going to do in these last 18 days to prove to God? Oh, I think I'm running out of battery. Let's see. What are you going to do in these last days to prove to God that you want what he said you could have? He showed you the vision. He told you to write it and make it plain. You did all your part. Now you don't want to war for it because it's taking too long to get there? Because the enemy told you couldn't have it? Because they didn't give you the promotion that you thought you were supposed to? They fired you instead of promoting you? How bad do you want it? And so in that, we got to not be afraid of pressure. I'm going to tell you this is a thing about me, and this is what I've learned over the course of my life, honestly, and working. I'm better under pressure. Sometimes on purpose, sometimes to my detriment, and I know that. I procrastinate so that I can have a whole bunch to do so I can do it best under pressure. I think it's dumb, but that's what I do. We have to be not afraid to act under pressure. We have to be willing to not be so scary at what God shows us. If you're quiet now, and this is what I wrote in the book, if you're quiet now, you may miss the real opportunity for purpose and the reason for being right where you are in the place that God has you. God has you in a specific place for a reason. And if you're too afraid to act now, if you're too afraid to open your mouth when he tells you to speak, because you're around people who may not receive your word. God gave you a word for somebody, but they don't want to receive it because it's not the best word. If you're too afraid to act now, you're going to miss the time to save the nation, the family, your children, your grandchildren, the business, whatever it is that God has put on you to do. You'll miss that opportunity. Once you realize the resources that you have that are at your disposal, once you realize the call on your life, look, what you were really processed for, how many of you have gone through a process to get where you are right now? I went through Hades and back to get to this process right here. To tell you that I don't care what y'all say. And I'm not being arrogant about it. To tell you that I love me unconditionally. To tell you that I love to look at me. And when I look at me, I see God in me. I see Jesus in me. I don't care what people say at this point. But it took a process for me not to fear of being accepted. Not being in the in crowd. It took a process for me to not care if you liked me or not. It took a process for me to not like me no more, because sometimes I didn't like me. And so when you really realize what you were processed for, you got to get up and go get it. Because see, once I realized what God processed me for, now I don't have an excuse why I can't go get it. Because now I see it the way he see it. When you begin to see things with your spiritual eyes, Your natural eyes can tell you that you broke. Your natural eyes can tell you got a repo coming. Your natural eyes can tell you that you don't have, that you got a sickness, a disease or something in your body that can't be healed. But if you see healing with your spiritual eyes, if you see overflow and lanyard coming with your, you don't care. It took me a process to begin to see stuff the way God see it. A friend of mine, when I wrote in this book, he said, LaTanya, you have everything that God needs you to have in your hand. But it's not until you start to see that thing with your spiritual eyes that those things will begin to come to pass. And do you know how long it took me to figure out what my spiritual eyes were? It took me at least 2 years to figure out what my spiritual eyes were. And I'm a minister. I'm a preacher. And it took me a minute. Some of us don't know what our spiritual eyes are. But when I began to see what my spiritual eyes saw, and it's not super religious, it's what my heart, your eyes are your heart is the eyes that to your understanding. This is your spiritual eye. Your heart was your spiritual eye. So when my heart began to tell me that everything was okay, that it was okay being okay, when my heart began to glean and my heart began to be happy because I was okay with just being who I was, I began to see the world like God was seeing it. I began to see me fearfully and wonderfully made. Because we quote scripture, but we really don't know what it means. So I was saying stuff that I really didn't feel in my spirit. But it wasn't until I began to see that thing with my spiritual eyes that it all began to open up. Life in full bloom began to happen for me. And so now I know what I'm processed for. How bad, LaTanya D. Walker, do you want what God say you could have? What are you afraid of? What are you afraid of? How do you do that? You know, what are you afraid of? Look, and this is how we get what God is trying to give us. Especially women, because we love to be in control. We love, especially single women. That's why and I'm talking about me at some point. That's why some of us can't get husbands. Y'all know I sip coffee when I start talking about us. So we can't get husbands because we want to be in control. We don't want to surrender first to submit to our husbands. So how do you get the thing that God said you could have? LaTanya, I'm going to just talk to me. Maritha, you got to put down your agenda. So for 15 years, I had my own agenda. For 15 years, I had my own agenda. Me, mine, I was going to do what I was supposed to do. I was going to run my business the way I was going to run it. I had my own agenda. And God said, I'm going to need you to put your agenda down, mama, so you can take care of my agenda. I'm going to need you to put your agenda down, put your plans aside. When you think that everything that you have, the things that bring you notoriety, because that's what I thought. If you go back to day 1 or 2, I think it was in there when somewhere in the book I told you, there was a time in my life that I had in my phone, 90% of the people in my phone was an A-list celebrity or a marquee football or baseball or basketball player because of the work that I was doing at the time, right? But when we began to think that the people, the things begin to bring us the notoriety, that's our plan. So God, listen, you got to put that down. You got to put the A-list down and come to the D-list. You got to put the A-list down. He said, when you stop holding on to the one thing that you're comfortable with, I was comfortable with my client base. I was comfortable doing business the way I was doing business. I was comfortable being a consultant to some of the richest people in the world. I was comfortable at one point in my life. But he said, when you stop holding on to the thing that you're comfortable with, that's when and when you're willing to give it up, what you perceive to be the best thing for status quo, for the platform, for the VIP interest and access, that, I'm just talking my life. I ain't talking yours. When you can walk up to the door and walk in wherever you want to walk, when you want to give up that so you can do what I say do, then you can go back and save the nation. You can't save a nation trying to be on platform. You can't save a nation trying to be in everybody's pulpit. You can't save a nation trying to be at everybody's event. Sometimes, and I'm going to talk about these events, if I don't come to y'all event, it ain't because I don't love y'all. It is not because I don't support y'all. God ain't giving me okay to go to your event. It doesn't say it's anything wrong with your event. I just don't have the okay to go. But you can't get mad because there's something in my life that he's processing. Listen, I may be praying for your event, but I may not be there because there's something that he's processing through me that I can't be there. But when you're willing to give up what they gonna say about you so that you can do what he says, then he can work through you. Esther was willing to die for her people. Esther said, I'm going to go in this thing. I'm going to post up. I'm going to go see the king. And if he kill me, he kill me. Because I'm going. That was her. We have to get to the point that I'm going in this thing and I'm going to go in and I'm going to come out without a fight. Like, I'm going to win this thing. How bad do you want? Well, I'm repeating it because we take it for granted that God showed us something or gave us something and we let it fall through the cracks. We let it fall through our hands. God has given some of us some of the best husbands. But because your friend got something that your husband can't give you at the moment, you ready to let yours go. God has given some of us the best jobs, but because they didn't promote you at the time that you thought you were ready, you're ready to walk off that job. God has told some of y'all to go start a business, but because you don't have enough money in the bank and your credit is shoddy, you don't want to step out by faith. So you're going to stay on the job that can't support you, that can't support your children, can't support your livelihood, but you're going to stay there, hoping for the platform. When you get to the place to say, I'm going to do what I got to do as long as it's what God says to do, God will elevate you in due season. And that's what he did to Esther, because at that moment, he not only did her enemy die, Esther was raised up. She was positioned for promotion. She was positioned for promotion, got promotion, and then her cousin, uncle, whoever they want to call him, he was promoted too. Come on. So everybody that was around Esther got blessed. Sometimes you got to take a hit for the rest of us to get it. So again, if I don't come to y'all stuff, and that's for y'all catching a replay, because somebody going to catch this that be talking about me. If I don't come to your stuff, don't get mad at me. I might be doing something else that God told me I needed to do to save y'all. I'm teasing. I promise I'm teasing. I'm just feeling it's almost time for me to go. So look. Put down what you have to do for the greater good of what God needs you to do, is what he said to me. How bad do you want it? Let go what you have, LaTanya, so that you can have what I say you can have. Because what you have is nowhere near what I'm going to give you if you are just obedient, if you just follow the process. Come on. The word of God says, and I'm done, and y'all can get the book and read the rest of this chapter, because I ain't going to give you all the chapters, but Confidential Conversations. It's on my website, latanyadwalker.org. I'll put it up on here later. But here's the thing. When you are willing to forego everything that you have for the good of God, do you not think that when you give up your stuff for his stuff, he's not going to bless it? That he's not going to blow on it? That he's not going to make that thing work for you? If God told you to give it up, don't hold on to it. Trust him. Trust the process. It might not look like it's supposed to look. If I could, and I did write a book. I was gonna say, if I could write a book about it, I did write a book about it. This told the story of the process that I was going through. That how I didn't want what you wanted for me, God. I didn't ask you to be who told you I wanted to be a preacher? I didn't. Who told you I wanted, that I didn't want any of this? And it was a process that God had to take me through. He had to break me. And when I tell you, I'm not a zodiac girl, but the bull in me, the Taurus, the bull in me, that's my, I fought that thing. And he had to break me. And then he began to ask me the questions, but that's the one question he asked. How bad do you want what I said you can have? Because if you want it, I'm going to have to break you. Y'all, and I think this is what they do to horses, to make horses do what they need to do. They kind of break their legs or something, right? To make them run right or do something. God had to break me. I was cocky in my own right. I'm just saying what I'm saying. I was cocky in my own right. Here I was, read the book. I was making some good money. My business we were good. When he said walk away. This was the second question God asked me. The first question was, what is your sacrifice? What are you willing to forego to get what I say you could have? When God asks you them kind of questions, I'm going to tell you now from experience, take your time and answer them. Because I didn't take my time. I blurted out what I thought I would sacrifice. And God came back and said, but you can't give it to me dirty. Some stuff we're trying to give to God dirty, and he don't want a dirty sacrifice. He said, you can't give me that dirty looking like that. Come on. How bad do you want what I say you can have? And if you want it bad enough, sacrifice, fast. If I tell you to fast for 5 days, don't fast for 3. I'm talking to me. I ain't talking to you. If I tell you to fast, LaTanya, for 21 days, don't fast for 3. How bad do you want it? What's your sacrifice? Go back to Tuesday night's discussion and begin to ask yourself, what did God promise me that has not come to pass? And I'm done. What did God promise me that has not come to pass? And then as you begin to write down the things that have not come to pass, right? Go back and ask yourself, how bad do you want it? And what is your sacrifice? What's your sacrifice to get what God said you could have? And then how bad do you want what he said? What are you going to do? Desperate times call for desperate measures. Don't you allow these last 18, 17 days to get you off your game. Don't allow these last days of the year make your promise a problem because you think you can't do it. You can't do it without him. Go in and ask God, what do I need to do in these last 17, 18 days? Because this one is just about over. What do I need to do, God, in these last 17 days? What do you want me to do? God, here's a question that I'm hearing in my spirit. God, what hurts you about me that I need to change? Because see, sometimes we think we're so perfect, we're so put together. I thought I was all put together. But ask yourself, God, what hurts you about me? God, what do I need to do in these last days to prepare myself for the promise? Because my promise, again, is not subjected to 2019's date and time, right? My promise is when I'm ready for it. So God, what do I need to do to position myself for promotion? Because it's not 2019. It's not a new year. We've had 2019 of them that I've been here, right? So it's not that. I've had 49 years here. It's every year we make these New Year resolutions. I'm not saying not to plan, but God is not subjected to time. So God, what do I need to do today that you can wow me tomorrow? Because that's what God wants. He's asking you, how bad do you want? Because if you want it bad enough, I can do it at a split second. I am an 11:59 type of God. I can do it when I want to do it. I'm a suddenly God. But you got to want it better than I want it for you. I heard somebody say that today. You have to want that thing better than I want it for you. And it's not until you get to that place where you feel desperate in this relationship with God, desperate to be in relationship with God, then he'll begin to show you. Oh, I hear it. He'll begin to show you, woman, to your husband. You ain't going to get him until you're desperate enough for God and so in love with God that your mind ain't even on him, that now all of a sudden you'll appear to him. I don't know why I'm on them women today, that with wives and husbands, that you'll just appear to him. Some of y'all looking for a husband, that you will just appear, but you got to get so thirsty for the relationship with God, so desperate to be in love with God, that when you do, then he'll just show you, he will present you to your spouse. But anyway, I'm done. We have 2 more installments, next Tuesday, next Thursday, and then I am out for winter break, and I'm writing the very last 9 of this 21-day devotional. So if you have not read the first 21, then you won't understand really the last 9. But I'm writing the last 9. It's going to come out in an ebook next year, at the beginning of first quarter of next year. An ebook called The Last 9, and it is the final 9 chapters, 9 days of this book. And if I tell you, I have 2 chapters in the introduction, and if I tell you, if you read this one, this was juicy. This is a page turner. Somebody just texted me today, and she said, and I'm not calling her name, but she said, do I have to read it day by day? She said, because I just want to keep reading it all, like I just want to finish it. And so I'm going to tell you, it's a 21-day devotional, but it's not reading like a devotional. It actually reads like a book. So if you want to read it through, Read it through and then go back and read the days that you need, because that's what I do. I read it through, and then when there's a day that I need, and the day that I needed the most was, I think, day number 5, that talked about fear. How do you move past fear? That's the thing for me. So I just went back and I read the day about fear. Go get the book. I promise you, if you don't like, here's what you can do. Go to my website. Sign up to receive 1 chapter of the book. I'm giving a free promo of the book, 1 chapter of the book. Read the chapter. If you don't like the chapter, you don't have to buy the book. If you like the chapter, buy the book. I promise you, it's a good book, and you'll have it before Christmas. It'll bless your life. LatanyaDWalker.org. Again, I'm writing the last 9 to complete this, and then there's something that's coming out of here, because you can't talk to God. I heard my bishop say, you can't talk to God and he don't talk back. He don't give you an answer. So we have a snapback from God. We have a snapback that's coming from God after the last 9. He's, I'm talking to him and I'm telling him what I have, but he's going to snap back on me. Yeah, that's how he talked to me. That's how God talked to me. So he know I'm a little, I'm the message version. So go get the book. If you have not gotten it, LatanyaDWalker.org. I love you to life. I'm gone. Deisha, I'm out. Peace up. A-Town down. I will see you guys back here next Tuesday. Next Tuesday, we are going to be reading Pursuit to Recovery. So, we started this off with Bruised but Not Broken. The blessings behind brokenness. God said that there were blessings that came behind brokenness. Well, here, we're at the pursuit of recovery, where he's beginning to show us everything that he said we could have. We're in pursuit to recover it, and then we'll end it up with least you forget, because after he has blessed you, because that's the promise he makes to us in Deuteronomy, that I will bless you, but when I bless you, least you forget that I didn't let your clothes wear out. I didn't let your shoes wear out. Come on, least you forget the stuff that you went through, that I brought you through. So there's a process to this whole thing. You went from broken to blessed. He promised you that the promise was still in effect. Now he's telling you, now that I've given you everything that I said, don't forget me. So we're going to end it. We're going to do next Tuesday, the Pursuit to Recovery, and then next Thursday, Least You Forget. And then I'm out so that I can finish the last 9, and I'm excited. So again, my last plug, go to my website, LatanyaDWalker.org. Put your email in there. I'm going to tell you this. I hate spam, so I'm not going to spam you, okay? I hate spam, so I'm not going to spam you. I'm not going to sell your stuff, but I need it for other things. So go ahead, put your name in there. Read chapter, I think it's 9. It's called Mask Unveiled. I think it is. I'm not sure. Go get it. And if you like it, just buy the book. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.